A staple tool found in offline render engines, and one that can certainly help add realism to a final shot, are area shadows. The effect wherein the penumbra or edge of a shadow gets softer and spreads out more the further away from the light source that it gets. A question that you may ask then is how we would go about creating and controlling such shadows in Unreal. Well, the good news, given that all lights in the engine have a mobility setting located in the Details tab, is that when a light is set to static, it becomes an area light with area shadows by default. Something we will need to keep in mind when using such a tool, though, is that not every light in the real world has the same amount of surface area, and so area shadow effect given to it. Figuring out which real-world light types we want to mimic in our scene then, and getting to know the size of the area shadows that should be applied to them in Unreal can be critical to the believability of a finished piece. To understand how we can control the amount of blurring on our shadow penumbras then, let's take a look first of all at the humble spotlight. In the 02_01 version of our scene, we are lighting the interior with artificial lights in this instance. And if we press the 4 key to jump to our bookmarked camera, we can focus in on the portion of the scene that we will be using. Now, it should be noted here that as the picture frames are a focal point in this particular shot, the light map resolution for them has been increased to a value of 256. Let's search for and click to select our spotlight in the World Outliner then, and take a look at the options that can be found in the Details tab. As noted, we are using the static option because by default static lights in Unreal are set to be area lights, and that is true be they point, spot, or even directional light sources. The area shape used by the spot and point lights as well is a sphere whose radius is set by means of the light source radius option. As we increase that value, we get to see the area size of the light as represented by this yellow sphere. The higher the value used here, the larger or softer the area effect on our shadows will be. If we increase this to a value of 10 in this instance then, and bake our lighting, you can see as we compare to our initial bake that used a radius of 0, that we now have much softer shadows as they move away from the light source. Let's load the 02_01B version of our level now, and press the 1 key to jump to another bookmarked camera view. Here we can see that the directional light in the scene is casting some nice long shadows. Over in the World Outliner then, let's search for the word direct, and click to select the directional light that we have. In this instance, we already have its mobility set to static, but we also need to know which of the controls found here will let us adjust the area shadows. Well, if we come to the light mask rollout, we have a light source angle control that, when altered, can cause our shadows to blur on the penumbra. With an angle of 0 and using a default exponent value of 2 then, all our shadows are crisp and harsh, as seen in the light build that we already have. If we set this to a value of 1 and rebake our lighting, and again compare the two versions though, we see that we are definitely getting an area shadow effect now. A value of 2 will increase this, but as you can see, if we again bake our solution, what we get is probably a little too much for this particular scene, at least in my personal opinion. Let's continue our testing using the exaggerated angle value of 2 though, as it will help us examine our next option, which is the shadow exponent. Now this control tells the light exactly when the soft shadow effect should start, in other words the distance from the receiving location to the shadow caster. Currently we have our lighting baked with an exponent of 2, but if we increase this to 3 and build our lighting, and then increase to a value of 5 and build again, we can see in our first comparison image that we have area shadow starting at about the halfway point here. But as we move to a value of 5, the shadow remains sharper for longer and then very quickly becomes blurred. Moving forward from this point then, we will be using both value and exponent settings of 1 and 2 respectively. When needing to create visualizations that will require an extra level of believability, it is going to be important that we perform careful studies on real-world light sources in order to be able to get our Unreal lights to match their look and feel as closely as possible. Knowing how to then create and control area lights and shadows in Unreal will of course help tremendously in that endeavor.